Hey there, folks. It's Stanford with Gunvote on Monday, September 13th. That means there is exactly 1 week, 7 days left before we all arrive at the conclusion of this, the 44th national federal election. If you haven't already, head over to gunvote.ca, register there. We'll try and get riding level emails out over this next week as we break down ridings that could go either which way in case you happen to live in one of those. Also, as well, if you want to support this this kind of daily broadcast and some of the stuff we got planned, which I'll let you know in a sec, head over to www.calibermag.ca/subscribe. Get yourself a subscription to our magazine. We'll send you 6 issues direct to your door. And your money goes directly to supporting stuff like this broadcast, us keeping abreast of the election, the gun vote effort, as well as obviously content, which in the next issue I believe includes part 2 of our history of how Uzi Gal ended up building some of his last submachine guns in Ontario, of all places. So if you want to head over there, much appreciated. Also, too, we'll need the money for snacks because this time, not this time next week, but a week's time, Monday evening on Election Day, I will be covering this live. We'll have a bunch of people probably joining us from the industry and from politics throughout the evening to discuss sort of how things are going and what it might mean for gun owners. So we'll be doing that for a few hours. That'll be live on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll be hosting a discussion and moderating that chat on one of those platforms. So keep your eyes peeled for the event. And again, if you want to help it out, subscribe to the channels here, like, bell notifications, all that kind of stuff, however you're watching this, be it on Facebook or YouTube. And keep an eye for the event and head over to the website, register and subscribe. So all that covered, we'll get into the events of the weekend. Not a lot of moves in the polls or a lot of moving in the polls, depending on who you believe. Generally speaking, the averages don't move. The Liberals and the Conservatives remain relatively tight, with the seat distribution breaking in the Liberals' favor still, but only slightly, which we'll get into. The biggest news is probably that support for the Liberals appears to be softening. It's not necessarily that CPC support has been picking up, but Liberal support has been softening, and a lot of pundits are chalking this up to potentially Trudeau's poor performance in the English language debate last Thursday. However, there's been some gaffes since then that I believe that particular attribution ignores. First off, there was a bit of a weird discussion where he said that you can't just tax the rich billionaires, and the NDP need to remember that, which is an odd tack to take. Additionally, we also saw sort of the soft launch of former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould's book, Indian in the Cabinet. I picked my copy up, luckily, on Saturday. It's formally being released on Tuesday, but it looks like those that wanted to obtain a copy early had no trouble doing so. I've flipped through it. There is some stuff in there that will probably have something of an impact. Some people will say that it won't, but I think some of the ways that it's been put and some of the specific excerpts and wording will likely resound with some key demographics at play in this election. Additionally, we saw Triple C, Christina Cesar Chavanez. I apologize if I've butchered that pronunciation. My apologies. Actually endorsing her local Conservative candidate, saying she's been a lifelong Liberal, but she is going to be voting Conservative in this election. Obviously, she has her own history with the Trudeau Liberals and the way that he's been treating women in the past. So those are all issues that have probably come to the fore and have, I think, over the course of the weekend, really reduced the momentum for the Liberals. It feels a bit like the early campaign where they were having trouble getting going. And that brings us to sort of the main point of this particular podcast today, which I think people can appreciate over the coming weeks, is that this particular election, more than most, has been one that simply doesn't have an overwhelming narrative. And what I mean by that is we haven't seen any kind of overwhelming ballot box question. In 2015, I think a lot of people would agree that the overwhelming narrative was to stop Harper. We saw the signs and the stickers and everything else like that. I think in 2019, they painted Andrew Scheer as very much a social conservative, and it became a case of stop social conservatism from forming government in Canada. But this go around, be it through the smart strategy and maneuvering of Aaron O'Toole's campaign staff, his own personal history as well, I can attest to. He's long voted in support of LGBT movements and stuff like that within the Conservative Party even. So it's not like it's an act. They can't paint him as that social conservative anymore, and they've struggled to find a narrative as a result. And I think it's out of that vacuum of a narrative that we've seen Maxime Bernier's PPC sort of grow. His feelings first brand of politics is very similar to Justin Trudeau's in that it's typically light on details and specifics, but you certainly feel good after hearing it. So you get a lot of immediate gratification to that, because when you don't have an overall plan, when no one is telling you, if vote for me and in 4 years your life will be demonstrably better in the following ways because of the following things that I'm going to do, you end up being batted back and forth like an emotional tennis ball. Which is sort of how the last elections felt, undoubtedly for gun owners more than most. But I think most Canadians would say, they've wanted to see various things come up, and it hasn't, because it's just been shotgun style issues management as things crop up. And as a result, this is, I think, where things get interesting, because we're going into this election with 7 days left. Obviously, for gun owners, this is a very, very crucial election. I don't think it's been adequately communicated by anyone in this community, the importance of anyone but Justin Trudeau winning. And I know that sounds glib, and some people may tune out at hearing that, but please understand that what I mean when I say that is it's not for any particular partisan reason, other than the fact that his gun policy of limiting all long arms to 5 rounds within the magazine means that everything from a Lee Enfield, your granddad's Lee Enfield from World War I that he used to feed his family, potentially when he got back, will need to have the magazine cut in half and welded up. Those are family heirlooms and historical artifacts, to say nothing of Pacific Coast Militia Ranger Winchester lever action rifles issued in the 40s to British Columbians and stuff like that that'll need to be crimped and prepared and whatnot in some cases. So there's a lot of situations that it's just awful, and I think gun owners haven't thought that through. Every single gun owner out there pretty much within this country, probably 98% of gun owners in Canada, have a firearm that will need to have the magazine permanently modified in order to comply with Justin Trudeau's legislation. This is going to create massive backlogs for gunsmiths. It's going to cost you money. Literally, it's just going to cost you money. It's going to reduce the amount of guns available to you. The newest and latest gun that comes out from brand X for hunting deer next season may not be available in this country, because that company may not want to do business with the regulatory headache that Canada may pose at that time. So I want gun owners to understand that. Now, for Canadians at large, motivation doesn't seem to be the problem, as gun owners seem to struggle to amass around a single thing and say, that has to be the case. Feeling somewhat pulled in different directions by the various policies. Canadians at large, with the lack of narrative, are seeming to form around the question of whether or not Justin Trudeau deserves a second election. This ballot box question seems to be a referendum on Justin Trudeau's leadership. And even within Liberal Party supporters, i.e. those voters that have identified as Liberal voters by ECOS, are not as motivated as Conservative voters to return a majority government. Now, what I mean by that is voters that identified and said, I will be voting Liberal in this election, also said to the polling company that apparently 51% of them or so said that they hoped that they saw a Liberal majority after casting their ballot, with quite a few of them hoping for a Liberal minority, and then a very, very small amount of them hoping for some other government to form with some sort of weird balance of power, undoubtedly. Now, amongst the Conservatives, that broke out to over 80% of Conservatives, I believe, 80 or 81%, looking for a Conservative majority. Now, why I bring that up is because we've also already heard immediately upon advanced polling, for those of you that did it, I believe the polls are still open today. I did it, it's great. It's a lot harder to cast ballots. There's less polling places due to both COVID and the short notice for this election. The lines for these polling places have been extremely long. Then you have the added social stressors of COVID and whether or not those rates are rising in individual areas and whether or not it plays into the election. And I think that leads to the second great story that no one's talking about in this particular election, which is effectively voter turnout. No one has mentioned whether or not voter turnout will play a large role in this election. I think it's going to be huge. When only 50% of your identified voters want you to form a majority government, that is a massive, massive problem for a party. that indicates very, very little internal support. That indicates they're probably having trouble getting staffing for volunteers at events. Doing everything from Burma shaves to door knocking is going to be trouble. Trying to GeoTV, they might still have some folks doing that, but that's really where it's going to hit you. To say nothing of where your voter turnout comes in. Obviously, the Conservatives doing quite well in that regard, and I think as the week goes on and we see Canadians decide, do they want another Justin Trudeau government, we'll start to see the ballots really start to amass behind the two frontrunners as people make their decisions there. And from those polls, there is some hope. Now, I don't want to give gun owners false hope. To be quite clear, the seat breakdowns on the larger poll aggregators still do show a Liberal minority, however slight it may be. But even there, all hope may not be lost, because a very slim minority, after all of the tumultuous few years that we've had with the economic outlook that we're facing, what government wants to be in power, what minority may be able to actually do what Canada needs as we try and get out of this pandemic and the economic crisis that is likely looming on the horizon. This government that we form next may not be the government that we have for any more than 12 to 18 months, potentially at most. So we're in for quite a long period of time here, and that's going to be interesting to see. So for gun owners out there, if there's any take-home lessons here, it would just be, if you haven't already, start getting engaged. As I discussed, GeoTV, Get Out the Vote, is going to be crucially important in this election. That lower level of support for Liberal voters really does open up a flank where Conservatives could potentially get a massive foothold with volunteerism. So if you want, if you're able to help out in this final week, this is really the last week. So it's so desperate that this week, for example, the national campaigns that are around Aaron O'Toole that have been running this out of likely the headquarters in Ontario, those staff are going to be get on planes and sent out to key ridings that they think they can flip, because it's an all hands on deck situation. The polls are almost even. It is literally a case of anything that we can do. So if you're a warm body with the ability to beat feet and have a heartbeat, then pick up the phone, contact your local Conservative EDA. It should be so easy, because it'll be your local candidate. You reach out to their office, give them a call, say, hey, I'm a gun owner in the area. I may not like Aaron O'Toole's policies on guns. I may not even like his flip-flop. You can say, I absolutely flip and hate the guy in the way he flip-flopped. But it's crucial to me that we don't have another Justin Trudeau election, because I don't want my granddad's Lee Enfield getting chopped up and welded on. So pick up the phone or email them. Do what you can this week. It'll be simple stuff, like it'll be driving people around. They may have you going out to seniors' homes on election day and trying to get identified voters out to the polling places. So contact those local EDAs, abso-freaking-lutely. If you also, little pro tip, if you hear that the campaign is coming to your area, like right now, I understand Aaron O'Toole's in Carp. You can read from the leaders' tour areas, what are battleground areas that they think they can pick up that seat, and they're sending him out there to try and get it. So if you're in one of those areas, you don't necessarily have to go to the leaders' event. By all means, if you want to, go for it. But it's more crucial that if you're in one of those areas, you recognize what the tour coming there means, that they think they can win. And you could help us win, and you could help us not get our guns destroyed. So get off your butt. It's 1 week, even if it's a couple nights. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger has always said someone else is out there doing it, right? The victor is the guy that's doing it most often. So get out there and volunteer. And if you can't do that, if you're too busy, keep an eye on your local polls. Vote for the most likely candidate to deny your seat to the Liberals, basically, whomever that may be. If you're watching this from Quebec and you're in an area where the Bloc is polling up and the Conservatives are polling down, vote for the Bloc. Anyone but Trudeau at this point has to be the key. Absolutely. So that's what you guys can do. If any Conservatives watching this, make it about Western separatism. I've not seen that come up yet, and it's one issue that I think in 6 years of Justin Trudeau, as someone that lives in BC but likes our entire country, as much as I make fun of Ontario, someone's got to bring that up. We've seen it go from a topic that wasn't really on anyone's radar in 2015 to there's a party on the federal ballot that wants to cut the country in half of Manitoba. that has to be Justin Trudeau's fault. Surely, I can tell you as someone in the West, it is Justin Trudeau's fault. So let's make it Justin Trudeau's fault. Remind people of that, and where we'll be if he wins again would be my pro tip. So that's all I've got for Monday. We'll be back tomorrow with more guests and whatnot, and hopefully a sponsor. Actually, we're talking to folks about that, so that's very exciting stuff as we look forward to more video content. We've got our first episode of Caliber coming up as well. That'll be coming up, the first Caliber podcast. We're starting that with interviewing some industry folks and chatting to give you guys some insights into what it's like to work in this very odd industry. And of course, as always, if something comes up, we'll break in with a live video or something like that and let you guys know what's going on. But that's been Gunvote for this year. Register over at gunvote.ca if you can. Keep an eye on gun stuff in your area. Volunteer with your local EDA, Conservative Party EDA, if you so desire to. It's crucially important for that magazine law, man. I'm telling you, K31s, Swiss K31 bolt action rifles, nicest bolt actions you can get. 6-round magazine, you know. Lee Enfields are 10. Just think about that. So get off your butts and volunteer if you can. Subscribe, calibermag.ca/subscribe to support me and what we're doing. And hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow. And if not, hopefully next Monday, there are the election night coverage. I'll get all my best anchorman suit on or something like that, and we'll see what we can talk about. So have yourselves a great Monday afternoon, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Adios.